Hey, real quick before the video starts, just wanted to give a big shout out to all the viewers and all the people who have subscribed since we started the channel a couple months ago. You guys have been awesome, helping me out a lot, and I'm glad you guys are enjoying the videos. And real quick, of course, I usually don't like to say this, don't like to ask, but 86% of you are not subscribed. We have 120 subscribers right now, and YouTube tells me we have 256 returning viewers. So if you guys are watching the videos, enjoying the content, enjoying the daily uploads we do, why not hit that subscribe button? It would help me out a lot, and everybody at the store would be so happy about it. So just wanted to mention that real quick, give a big thanks, and if you like the videos, subscribe. So I guess enjoy the video, and thanks for watching.
Alright, we're at Grilly's Gaming with Kyle. Kyle, what deck are you playing, and how did you do at tonight's event?
Playing Madolche, went 5-0 flawless, baby.
Nice. Well, let's get right into the deck list then.
Alrighty. So, Madolche is one of those decks that's like just under the necessary threshold to break into the meta. It's got a lot of quirks that keep it being not exactly tiered, but still very competitive to play, because the whole concept of Madolche is to have a monsterless graveyard. So functionally what you're playing is a deck that can't play hand traps or forbidden droplet.
That's very tough.
That being said, you're not completely boned, because the Madolche cards themselves are some of the most individually powerful cards I've ever read in my life. And when you combine them together, you're easily able to OTK on the draw, and on the play you can easily set up a sturdy enough board to play through most meta decks. So we'll start with the build. We're on 3 copies of Madolche Majolene. This is the Stratos of the deck. On normal or flip summon, it searches any Madolche monster, including itself, and it's important to note this effect is not once per turn. And all the main deck Madolche monsters have the gimmick where if they are destroyed by battle or card effect, they shuffle themselves into the deck. That's the way you trigger most of your spells and some of your traps, and is necessary to trigger some graveyard effects of your Xyz monsters. But this card is incredible.
Best card in the deck, probably.
Oh, there's plenty of best cards in the deck, up to and including this one, Madolche Angeli, another 3 of. Contribute itself for cost. It specials any Madolche from deck. The thing it specials can't be killed by battle, which comes up in very niche circumstances, but it will shuffle back into your deck during your next end phase. This is another way you start your main Madolche combo going first, and it's a way to avoid having monsters in grave going second, because this monster doesn't care if you have monsters in grave or not. It tributes and gets your starter, which is 3 copies of Madolche Pating Sasur. Triggers on special summon. It specials any Madolche from hand or deck. The level is reduced by 1, and you are only locked in the Madolches for the rest of the turn. Now, this lock is annoying a lot of times. You find that you're very restricted in what you can do in terms of extra deck plays, but the Madolche Xyz, again, are some incredibly powerful monsters, and this is the main way you're cheating out a rank 4. It also has an effect where if you have a monsterless graveyard, you can special it from hand, and that'll trigger its second effect, which is just incredible. And then, as the main target, you're specialing off that, we have the 1 of Madolche Pudding Sis. When she battles a monster at the end of damage calc, it'll pop any card in your opponent's field and gains 800 attack if you have a monsterless graveyard. Those effects are rarely ever coming up, as it's more important as an Xyz material under certain monsters. And if you cheat it off the Pudding Sisur, you make it a 4, and that instantly makes any rank 4 in your deck. Also playing 2 copies of Madolche Hootcake. This is another starter if you have monsters in grave, because it targets any monster in your grave. It'll banish it and then special any Madolche from deck except itself on a hard once per turn. It's incredibly big for a level 3 in terms of stats, and it's also the way you cheat out any of your starters, again, assuming you have any monsters in grave, whether you're playing against Invoke Dogmatica Shadow and they hit you with Maximus, or you're forced to use a hand trap. And then the card you're getting most of the time off of Hootcake is 2 copies of Madolche Mesengelato. This card, when it's special summoned, if you control a beast-type Madolche monster, which Hootcake is, searches any of your Madolche spell or traps. Again, not once per turn, but important to note this card is a when you can, so it can miss timing if you mis-sequence your effects properly. But it is incredible to get any of your spells, which are some of the most high-impact cards in the deck. Going into Madolche spells, we have 3 copies of Madolche Salon. This card, out of Eternity Code, is incredible. It reads just like a custom card. It gives you a second normal summon of any Madolche, and when a Madolche monster shuffled from your grave into your deck or added to your hand, you set any Madolche spell trap. Now, both of those effects are hard once per turn, but seeing this card makes you plus like a billion. People have played this card at less than 3, and honestly, I believe that should be a war crime. This card is so incredibly strong, and it helps facilitate unprecedented levels of board setup and combos that I think the card is basically, like I said, a custom. We play 1 apiece of Madolche Ticket and the field spell Madolche Chateau. Ticket, when a monster shuffles, like triggers Salon, searches any Madolche monster, and if you have a fairy type monster on the field, when this effect triggers, you special it. And Chateau, on activation, will shuffle all your Madolche monsters from your graveyard into your deck, which will trigger Ticket and Salon. It gives all Madolche monsters on the field 500 attack and defense, and if any monster would shuffle into your deck by the effect of a Madolche monster, you can add it to your hand instead. This has incredible synergy with certain hand traps, and it helps recycle resources into your hand and keep you in the game if you go into long grind sessions.
Why just 1 of each?
Well, you play the 1 each of those 2 because they are searchable. They're searchable off SN Gelato, and they're settable off Salon. But you want to play multiple Salon so you can get that trigger and you get the high impact variety gameplay that the Salon offers. And since they're so searchable, you only need 1 apiece of the field spell and the ticket.
Gotcha.
And then for the last in the Madolche main deck, we have 2 copies of Madolche Promenade. This is your archetypal Omni Negate. It targets any card on your opponent's field and any Madolche on your field or in your grave. Negates your opponent's card's effects for the turn and adds your Madolche back to your hand. Also has a graveyard effect where you can banish it, target any Madolche Xyz, and attach any Madolche monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard to it as material. That effect comes up less often, but this is, again, an Omni Negate. It's recyclable in the deck, and it doesn't negate activation, it negates effects, so it circumvents once per turn restrictions. And we play 2 because you do occasionally have to use the banish, and sometimes you'll activate Promenade while you have Salon set, and you need to set a second Promenade because of the forward setup your opponent's going to have, because it's 1 negate, so it's not going to be like a game ender on its own, so sometimes you need to play multiple. I like 2. I found it's more effective than 1, but you playing 3, I found you sometimes brick a little bit, so I think 2 is the optimal ratio for that. And that's it for the Madolche cards, and now we have the cards that make Madolche playable. Starting off, we have 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity, an absolute must-play in the deck. Extravagance is not a suitable replacement for this card because of all of the 1-card starters the deck has. You want to be able to dig deep and find your starters as opposed to just drawing 2 off the top. Also, being able to choose what you banish is incredible for the extra deck, which is admittedly a little bit finicky sometimes. The half damage effect is unfortunate because if you resolve Prosperity, you cannot OTK your opponent, but you can leave them on incredibly low life. And you can't draw cards. That card effects restriction of Prosperity isn't relevant because no Madolche card draws cards. We don't play any draw cards in the deck because we have Prosperity, which is just insanely good. Also play as Insulation, we play 3 copies of Crossout Designator, and we play our Crossout Designator targets. We have an Ash, a Veiler, Nib, an Imperm, and a Called By. Called By is sort of like Crossout Designator number 4 and Crossout Target number 5. Because your combo is so explosive but vulnerable, you need Insulation, and Crossout Designator provides an Insulation, and these are just the 4 cards that really mess you up the most. It's worth noting that particularly Effect Veiler, if you have to use it, is recyclable under Chateau and can be fired more than once per turn.
Wow, that's pretty good.
And then another incredible release from Modern Sets that has been seen from Madolche, 3 copies of Small Worlds. So Madolche is one of the most adept decks in existence at exploiting Small Worlds because they're all different levels, types, and attack and defense values, but they're all Earth. So with proper deck building, you can basically bridge from any card in your deck to any card in your deck. And this functionally is just an all-purpose searcher, which Madolches appreciate since, again, you have such explosive 1-card combos.
Is there any specific card you want to search off of Small Worlds?
Small Worlds, you really want to hit Pudding Sasur if you're monsterless graveyard. If you have a monster engraved, then you're going to want to hit an Angeli. And it's played as bridges. To find those, we have 1 copy of Comungus and 1 copy of Dino Wrestler Pancratops. A big weakness of the deck is unaffected by card effect monsters above 3,000 attack, because that's what your attack values max out at. So having searchable Kaijus and searchable Pancratops for going second is a godsend for the deck. It really cures a lot of the deck's biggest weakness, and it gives you insulation if you end up having to go second. Obviously, I play mine as a going first build, and it explains the last card in the main, which is 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier. Because Branded Despia is the deck to beat this format, I find that having insulation against that specifically going first is quite handy. Although going second, it's also not bad to have in the main. And speaking of, that will conclude the main.
In any other format, what deck would you play, or what card would you play over Deep Barrier?
Gozen Match is a really good card to play. It's actually in the side deck. Because all your main deck monsters are Earth, you find that you're never ever vulnerable to Gozen Lock. The small world targets you play are also Earth attribute for that reason. But I find that Deep Barrier is slightly more high impact, especially with Adventure running around. It's not a really good format for Floodgates.
Gotcha.
So going into the extra deck, we play 3 copies of each of the Madolche made extra deck monsters. We have 3 copies of Teacher Glass Souffle. This card is incredible, and it does not represent necessarily what the power level of the card is upon first read. So as a quick effect, detaches a material, targets any Madolche monster on your field that makes it unaffected by monsters. And then if a Madolche card is sent to grave, you can shuffle up to 2 cards from either graveyard into the deck. Now this card does trigger its second effect off the first effect detach. It's also essential for getting a Madolche monster in your graveyard to trigger the effect of your rank 5. It's also a 3k wall, unaffected by monster effects, and the graveyard shuffle that interrupts graveyard setups on your opponent's turn. This card is absolutely incredible, but it pales in comparison to the best card in the extra deck, the queen herself, Tiara Masu. So this card is a meta-warping super threat. If it weren't bound in a deck like this card would be incredible. Soft once per turn, detach a material, target any 2 Madolche cards in your grave, shuffle them into your deck, and then you can non-targeting shuffle cards on your opponent's field into the deck equal to the number you shuffle back. This outs Dragoon, it doesn't proc Mirror Jade, it outs any problem child you could possibly imagine. This card is a menace, and that's why I love her. She is precious, and that's why we invest in ultis.
What are the ratios? So you got 3 of each.
Yeah, we're playing 3 of every main deck, or extra deck Madolche monster. And then we're moving on to the rank 5, the sicko mode version of Pudding Cess. She, once per turn, can target any Madolche card in your grave and just shuffle it into deck. Triggers your spells and triggers her second effect, which, if she has the regular Pudding Cess as an Xyz material, if you shuffle a card into specifically the main deck, you detach a material and special any Madolche from your deck. That effect is not once per turn as long as it has Pudding Cess as a material. This is how you generate insane amounts of advantage. It's very simple to proc if you use a teacher to detach any material. This can overlay herself on top of any rank 4 or lower Madolche Xyz, of which there are no Xyzs lower than 4, but we'll not talk about that. So you make her, you detach, target herself, make her unaffected, and then you overlay for a Pudding Cess, and you target the monster you just detached, shuffle it into deck, and if you made it using Pudding Cessor, you will have Pudding Cess as a material, and you'll cheat out another monster for free, which is usually Angeli. But if you started your combo with Angeli, then you get Hoot Cake, and that gets a free Mess Gelato by banishing the teacher from grave.
Activate the card Magical Cylinder.
We also play 3 copies of the Madolche Fresh Sistart. Now this card is not great. It's not exactly the link you'd want to play, but the fact that it says Madolche is good enough, and I find it's actually very high impact in certain situations, especially this format. While it points to a Madolche monster, you cannot target or destroy your Madolche spell traps with card effects. People read that and think it provides protection to itself or your monsters, but it protects your back row, which is essential in a format dominated by back row removal because of cards like Adventure and Branded Despia and Dinomorphia. And also has an effect that if it would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you shuffle a Madolche monster from your graveyard into your deck instead as a replacement effect. So it circumvents like effect negation and provides decent protection to your fields. It's an imperm magnet for sure, but it's absolutely a must play. And then for the last couple of slots, we play a Time Thief Redoer. It's not as good in faster formats, but in slower formats, like Heart of the Underdog, or if you're playing against a non-meta deck, this card is a house, just ripping cards from your opponent's deck, able to generate advantage and spin cards. It's absolutely a menace. It is a dark, so be careful if you're playing Gozen Match, but usually that doesn't come up because most of the time you're locked into Madolches, so this is just a Prosperity Banish target. Speaking of, we also are on 1 copy of Baguska. Plan B, as he's colloquially known. He is an Earth, and therefore is not susceptible to Gozen match, and he is just a buy time card. If you have Salon, 2 normals, and you can't play through a board, you just make Baguska, set him in defense, and just wait him out until you draw something playable. The last card in the deck is an Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. Never made on your first turn, but is essential if you're going to break boards, because again, if your opponent has an unaffected Bungus that you can't out with 3,000 or more attack, you can use it as a material to summon Underworld Goddess, and also is unaffected by cards that don't target, and it has a special from Graveyard, Negate. And I find that having the option to use this to out problem cards is essential to make the deck playable. Very rarely ever made, but extremely high impact when it is.
Very nice. So what's the count on the main deck, by the way? I forgot to ask.
The count on the main is 40. Have thought about playing more, occasionally bump up to 41 or 42, but I find that 40, when you're playing Prosperity, is a mandatory effect because you need to find your consistency and your 1-card starters and your back row if you already have your starters. And 40 is basically essential. Moving on to the side, we are on 3 copies of Token Collector for your Tenyi Sword Soul and your adventure issues. Can't go wrong with Token Collector. It is an Earth, so it works under Gozen. It is a 4, so it makes any of your rank 4s from the deck that aren't Madolches. It's a 2,000 defender, and it can recycle itself from Graveyard, so I find having this just as a staple in your side is a godsend. You can also play 3 copies of Evenly Matched and 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. Now, I love my going second staple blowout cards, and these are one of the best in my opinion. You don't really mind giving up your battle phase for Evenly Matched, and you don't mind giving up damage for Dark Ruler if it means you set up a board and break your opponents, because a lot of times decks lack the comeback ability that Madolche does to recur from a broken board state and come back and actually win the game. So if you break your board with cards like Dark Ruler and Evenly, and then you resolve a Tiramisu to get rid of the rest of their resources, then I find you basically have just won the game on the spot without actually needing to inflict damage. Then we also have 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance. It stops adventure stuff on occasion, unless they just hard draw everything is insane. Because you're playing only continuous spells and your really high impact spells you're getting out on your first turn, or you're setting on your opponent's turn by triggering Salon. You find that anti-spell is not an issue to play around at all, and is mostly just basically Imperial Order if you flip it. Again, it is susceptible to back row removal, but I find that if you draw a face flip it, your opponent better have the out, because if they don't, you basically have Imperial Order. And the last card we have in the side is of the aforementioned 3 copies of Gozen Match. Definitely the best floodgate you can play in the deck, because again, your whole deck is Earth, so you're basically not affected by this card in the slightest, and against certain matchups is an absolute blowout.
This is like the MVP of the side deck then?
Absolutely.
All right, well, right on, man. Congratulations on the 5-0 top.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks again for the deck list, and peace out.